Barring that, we're going to have to treat you as an enemy, and this is going to escalate. Now, they don't want to escalate because Putin and company, they know the cost of war. But the United States is not to be trusted in this. I'm sad to say. We are the big imperialist instigator right now in the world. And our intent is not to find a way that we can peacefully coexist with Russia, China, and Iran. We want to destroy all three, and then North Korea too. And those countries have come to the realization, you know what, that we better hang together, because the United States, the U.S. presence in Ukraine would be aspirational going forward. It's what we'd like to have happen. But in terms of our ability to actually make it happen, that's going to be something else, because I don't know if Russia will ever take this step. If they ask my advice, I would tell them to give one very clear message to Steve Witkoff. I'd have Putin say, Steve, here's the deal. What you're doing to us right now are acts of war. And were it not for our patience, we would have wiped out most of your cities in America. What I want from you, and to make sure that President Trump hears this clearly, is you need to end all of your military support for Ukraine. You need to end your intelligence activities on our borders. And you need to stop supplying weapons. Stop being the principal instigator of this. You back away. Because as soon as you do that...
You didn't get me. This is crazy. This is Hegseth, I think. And I'm becoming more and more convinced that he's short-lived also.
Yeah. No, it's that tweet, whatever the social media post was, it was so juvenile. It's just, there's no seriousness. It's like the kind of threat some guy in the locker room will make against some other guy, that, you know, over some imaginary beef. And you know, what Trump really needs, what America needs, is someone who's sitting in the Secretary of Defense chair that is the very last thing they want to do is go to war. Because, and that's somebody that's been there and understands what the actual cost is. Because I am convinced that one of the reasons the United States has been continually embroiled in these foreign conflicts, where we go out and start them, is we don't pay a price. We don't. There are a few Americans that suffer, and they get their legs blown off, or completely disfigured, or traumatic brain injury, and there is an appalling number of suicides among veterans. However, you know, that as a percentage of the U.S. population, infinitesimal. It is not a major problem for the United States. So we don't bleed over it. So hell. And so he'll go up, he'll cool his heels in New York. He'll make some new friends up there, get some new business opportunities. And probably within a year or so, he'll be gone. However, it does create a real, to go through the Senate confirmation process, they're going to beat the hell out of the guy. The Democrats, boy, they're on their knees saying there is a God. We now have a gift that we can just blast him. He'll have to, under oath, deny that he knew Jeffrey Goldberg, which is a lie. There are other credible reports out there that he absolutely knew him, even though he's denied having any contact. And then they'll get into the particulars of a lot of various policies. It'll be ugly. He'll ultimately get confirmed, but the Trump administration is going to get another big black eye.
If I were Elizabeth Warren or someone like that, I'd lean into the mic and I would say, are you going up to New York?
British mercenaries as well. And Russia's going to give them a chance. Stay out or get killed. It's that simple. Donald Trump's failure to appreciate.
No, not even in the uniformed leadership of the military, which is now so enamored of Lockheed Martin and other big contractors that all it can think about is it's 10 to 12 years of retirement at $1 million a year as an advisory board member or whatever. Brain dead Pentagon is what we got. So the answer to your question is no. Now, there are some people out there. And by the way, your business about China and maybe that relationship not being anything but a thorn in our side too is emphasized more and more by the new president in Taiwan, who looks a lot like Chen Shui-bian now, who is a CSB, I'll call him. I'm making a mess of the Chinese. Take that into consideration too. The Army can't even think about the future in terms of recruiting. It's so abysmal now, but the cadre of those to be recruited is going to go down by 15 to 16% because of demographics. So their pool is going to be even smaller. The empire is inalterably and utterly broken, and Donald Trump is presiding over it. If you ask me the question now, this moment, what do I think is Donald Trump's strategic objective? If I had the audacity to suggest he had one, I agree with Anatole Lieven in his piece that he wrote yesterday, I think, where he says this could be a positive because it does show some willingness of the United States to hang around, even if it's only in an economic sense, not a security sense, not really. But it could show that, and it could be something that Putin could accept and Zelensky could accept, and we could get closer together. But I don't think I even support that interpretation. I think we failed. And I think J.D. Vance was trying to cover up that failure. We've failed to recognize ourselves that we are the perpetrators of this war. We are a belligerent in this war. Ukraine is our proxy. Zelensky, if he were to awaken to that, suddenly have an epiphany, would probably want to smack Trump in the face, not ask him for forgiveness or anything. We are a belligerent. We are dealing with the other belligerent, Russia. Russia has won. Face that reality and get this over with. But Trump's not going to do that. He's not going to do that because it's not a face-saving politically or otherwise measure for him to do that. So I don't see that we're going to make any progress at all. I'm really sad to say I don't see that we're going to make any progress. The progress is going to be made by Russian soldiers on the battlefield. And if NATO's not careful, if the United States is not careful, we're going to wind up with a lot more we're going to wind up with a true rump Ukraine, because Russia's not going to stop. It's just going to keep going.
Yeah, but what Vance forgot when he said, oh, boy, the Russians came up with their peace plan. Hello, Putin's had it out on the table since June 14th of 2024. They have not deviated from that, but they're in the process of augmenting it now. It's going to be more expansive because up to this point, Russia was content to take the 4 oblasts where the referendums were conducted and the people voted to become part of Russia, those federal republics, Zaporizhia, Kherson, Donetsk, and Lugansk. Now, Russia is poised. They're going to take Dnipropetrovsk, which is the oblast that's directly west of the Donbass. They're already in Kharkiv. They're already in Sumy, which are up on the northeast corner of Ukraine. And after that is Poltava. So all of a sudden, Russia could be in control of 4 more oblasts. Now, at that point, Russia can make a decision. Are we going to have a referendum, a supervised UN election? Let the people decide, do they want to be part of Ukraine or want to be part of Russia? And they're going to take Odessa. So they've given Ukraine a chance to settle this. Stop now. We'll keep these 4. You can have those 4, and we'll figure out. But you've got to come out of NATO, number one, and you have to have elections and get rid of all these anti-Russian rules on your books. But Ukraine's not going to do that.
Reminded me of the Pete Hegseth of old. That is the Fox News man. I don't think the Houthis in any way, fashion, or form are intimidated by the United States. So that is a lie by Hegseth. But of course, he's not going to say that. And second, I don't think Iran is intimidated by his statements about the effectiveness of our bombing against the Houthis. Take that in stride, Iran, because that's what we're going to do to you. You're next. If I were Iran, I'd say, bring it on. If you're going to treat me the way you're treating the Houthis right now, bring it on, because I'll shoot you out of the air and I'll cause you some real pain, and I'll cause the region even more pain. So this is insane. It's like comic book characters. Yeah. You got the guy in the one frame and he says, zap, bang, dude, I'm going to get you. And then in the next frame, it's zap, bang, dude, you didn't get me.
This agreement was all about making Donald Trump look like I accomplished something. And it's a complete fraud. So it doesn't do anything other than let Trump pretend this is dress up. He gets to pretend that he's a doctor or pretend that he's a policeman. Now he gets to pretend that he's this great deal maker. And it's a complete joke. Just the fact that here's Scott Bessent signing that agreement with a nobody from Ukraine. Some lady, seemed like a nice lady, but who was she? You're not a player. What happened to having Zelensky sit there and sign it with you? Zelensky, he won this round against Donald Trump. Absolutely. Trump didn't get all the things that he claimed he was going to get.
It's insane what we're doing all across the globe. We're not winning in Ukraine. We're not winning in Gaza or anywhere in the Levant. And we are losing big time all across the face of the globe with respect to China's moving ahead inexorably. It's insane. And this administration marks that insanity hour by hour.
Look, it's the only good news out of that is it continues to overextend Israel's capabilities.
Yes.
It's one thing if Israel's sitting on great, vast manpower reserves and ample supplies of equipment and weapons and ammunition, but they aren't. And so they're trying to fight they're committing the genocide in Gaza. They're doing the same in the West Bank and Jenin in particular. They're into southern Lebanon, and now they're into Syria. And all of that, as they extend and expand their military operations, tell you what, that logistics tail becomes a big factor. Logistics and manpower. And you put stresses and strains on that institution, and it becomes more brittle, not resilient, and it can easily break. This is the essence of hubris, that Israel in its arrogance will end up destroying itself.
Haaretz reported yesterday they're actually sending exclusively regulars into Gaza now. They're sending the reservists other places like Syria and Lebanon if they'll go, because the reservists are refusing to go back online, as it were, if they go to Gaza. Yeah. They got real problems. Let me say that I can't believe, I know politics is politics. And I know that vice presidents have to extol their presidents and secretaries of state have to do the same thing. But the sycophancy of the remarks that J.D. Vance chooses and Marco Rubio chooses is just appalling. It's appalling. It shouldn't happen. These are professional relationships over political relationships, especially when you're talking about war. So it shouldn't happen. Now, that meeting, as I've said on other podcasts, between President Trump and Zelensky at the Vatican looked like a confessional. I suspect Zelensky was doing the confessing. And the agreement maybe was discussed there, this new, much touted agreement over minerals and such. You're not making that cell phone anymore, or you're not doing that kind of battery anymore. Oh, by the way, China now is the leading producer of batteries and better batteries in the world, and a number of other things that go along with that. But this critical minerals business is a real tricky bag, and you have to be very careful about how you parse it. Is this military? Is this industrial? Is it both? Is it dual use? Is it here? Is it here? Is it there? Do we have it? Does this country have it? Do our allies have it? Like Australia, who didn't even want to get back into the business because it wasn't economically feasible to get back in the business for rare earth metals. So it's much more complicated than these idiots like Vance and Hegseth and Trump seem to want to make it. It's not that simple. Much of the world's economy is not that simple anymore.
And there's not a damn thing we can do to stop it. The other 2 days ago, the Finns and the Norwegians and the Swedes, NATO's conducting a maritime exercise up in the Baltic Sea. And there was a Russian oil tanker that was detained. Russia went out and conducted its own military exercise yesterday with both its surface fleet and submarines, and they were launching missiles out of submarines near the U.S., the NATO exercise flotilla, who they immediately like, oh, Jesus. They backed off. They went to safe harbor. And Russia sending a message. You know what? If you're gonna start attacking our ships up here in the Baltic, we're going to take you out. And this war will expand. But Russia's looking at it as I did this 3-part series on the history of NATO and U.S. military exercises in Ukraine. Ukraine's been a de facto member of NATO since 1995. And NATO has been embarked on a path that accelerated under Barack Obama and then took off on steroids under Donald Trump, with the plan to militarily defeat Russia as a way to go after China, because they had to get Russia out of the way before we could attack China. That's our thinking. That's our strategic thinking. And to have somebody that's that cavalier as Pete Hegseth, without even, having the common sense to step back and say, look at what we claimed we were going to accomplish in Yemen. Now we're seven and going 8 weeks in. We have not reopened the Red Sea. We've not established freedom of navigation. We've not shut down the Houthis' ability to carry out these attacks. And in fact, just this morning, the Houthis launched some more missiles at Israel. Yep. But we're spending a lot of money and putting the U.S. naval assets at tremendous risk.
I would just add, Nima, that we are doing tremendous damage to whatever reputation we had with regard to military prowess. Tremendous damage. And the whole world's watching. The whole world is watching. The only thing we have in our arsenal that the world is frightened of, and with good reason, is our nuclear weapons.
Yeah, it's like you're watching a guy that looks like he's a tremendous fighter. He's very physically, appears to be real powerful. And all of a sudden, he gets into a fight with a dwarf, and the dwarf kicks him in the balls, and he collapses on the ground. And all of a sudden, everyone's looking around saying, "Oh, hey, Mr. Invincible ain't so invincible." And it's not just there. Look at Afghanistan. Those are the big three. Trump, again, this is out of Russia's always, I think it's wrong to think that Russia has shifted its position. That they weren't willing to talk to Zelensky, but now they are. Hell, they were willing to talk to the Ukrainians back in February of 2022, which is the reason Russia launched the operation, that special military operation, the way it did, was to compel Ukraine to come to the negotiating table. And it achieved that objective. And they actually had, Sergei Lavrov told me personally 8 weeks ago, that it was the Ukrainians who brought the paper into say, okay, here's the outlines of the deal, which included protecting the Russian speakers in the Donbass and a reduction in Ukraine's military force. And Russia said, great, they're going to sign off on it. There were still details to work out. But it was the United States that came in and told Zelensky via Boris Johnson, don't do it. So they stopped there. September of 2022, who issues the edict that it's illegal to talk to the Russians? Zelensky. It's not the Russians. Russia's willing to talk to them, but what Russia's going to say to them is just like what the Soviet generals said to von Paulus at Stalingrad. This is where you guys stack your arms. This is where you assemble what's left of your soldiers. They're going to dictate terms of surrender. That's how this is going to end. It's not like they've got a disagreement over child custody, and each parent has a legitimate claim to the child. Ukraine no longer has a legitimate claim. The Russians recognize that the Nazi ideology that undergirds this society and the celebration of criminals like Bandera, that's going to be eradicated. And one of the ways you eradicate that is it's made illegal, and people that propound those kinds of ideas and thoughts, they're going to be put in prison. Russia's not playing around with this, and the West assumes that they are, sadly.
I fear greatly that will be the case, and I'm sure Putin does too. I don't think for a moment that we're miraculously a ceasefire peace agreement to materialize and everybody's happy with it for 24 hours, that Russia would violate it. Ukraine would violate it all along the line of contact, as it were. They would violate it all the time, every day, 24/7. That's the kind of people live there, at least in some respects. I'm not trying to condemn all Ukrainians, but I had to deal with this country from 2002 to 2005. Corruption is the name of the game in Ukraine, and monopoly is the name of the game. Even Yulia Tymoshenko had a telecommunications monopoly. When she came in, I thought, oh, a breath of fresh air, a woman. She was worse than the guy who preceded her. They're that way. So I would be really worried if I were Putin about the policing, as it were, of whatever agreement takes place. I'm not going to violate it, but they will.
Yeah. You go back and look at, the United States embarked, with benefit of hindsight, the United States embarked on a sort of a comprehensive plan to try to destabilize and destroy Russia. One of the legs of that attack was promoting the Islamic extremists in Chechnya. Yeah. That carried out a 10-year war against Russia. Russia defeated them. Russia took some enormous casualties during that period. You remember the assault that took place on a school. They killed like 600 kids and parents. It was just horrific. But Russia defeated them, and now today, with the Chechen battalions, divisions that fill the Russian army, and the is a prime example where their love for Mother Russia supersedes their love for Allah. And I don't know how the Russians have managed to pull this off, but they know what it's like to have to fight an internal war. Now, you're correct that there are those radicals in Dagestan and Chechnya, and those have made their ways into the radical Sunni movements. But Russia has proven that it could deal with that threat, and in a way that we've never proven. I think it's a strategic consideration. Russia to me, they provide an example of what the United States could be, because they didn't waste trillions of dollars in overseas wars. Their money was devoted to rebuilding Russia from within, from the disaster that it was in 1999. And Putin deserves the credit for that. And I think that's generally appreciated in Russia, that Putin, instead of embroiling them in unnecessary wars, rebuilt the society. But this war in Ukraine was not an unnecessary war. This is an existential threat to Russia, because the plan of NATO all along has been to destroy Russia. I don't know if you caught the two Moscow pranksters, Vovan and Lexus. Yeah. So they got this guy, Paul Massaro, he's a top U.S. guy at the OSCE. And he admits in there, yeah, our plan, we've got to defeat Russia so we can go after China. That was what Aaron West Mitchell wrote in his paper that was published in the National Interest in August 2021, but had been submitted to the Pentagon's Office of Net Assessments in 2020. This has been genuinely the plan of the United States. They view Russia as something we got to destroy, we got to break it up, and then we can go after the real enemy, which is China. And the fact that there are people in the United States that are actually thinking this way and promoting policies to that extent is they're going to walk us into an ambush and we're going to get blown up. That's what's going to happen.
If you know a map, just a map, and what 11 time zones means, and the distance between, let's just take the border of Ukraine and Vladivostok. If you know the distance between now the southern portion of what is Russia to the Arctic, that's such a preposterous statement. This geography alone screams at you that you're nuts. Not to even mention the Russian people, who have shown throughout their history.
And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. I think the Europeans are a group of disgraceful colonialists anyway, have been responsible for raping so much of the world that they're getting a little bit of karma, a little bit of payback is what they're due. But the notion that the NATO is now more united than ever before, nonsense. Trump has managed to accomplish that. The Europeans actually are going to do everything they can to try to sabotage us going forward. And yet Europe is not in a position. Militarily, they're a joke. Economically, they're in trouble. They're not sitting on some vast store of natural resources that can, plus the human capital in these countries has become just a joke as well. Russia's looking out and realizing that Europe is a limited military threat, and they're an annoyance, more like a yappy little dog that, for God's sake, he just appointed a woman at the National Security Council to be in charge of the whole Middle East portfolio, who's an Israeli citizen, for Christ's sake. Can you imagine? Yeah, I'm going to have a Chinese citizen be the head of my Asia policy, and I'm going to have a Russian citizen who is a member of the KGB, the head of my Russian policy. Now, all those countries would be happy if that was the case, but that's what Trump is doing. And because it's Israel, he gets away with it. So I think because of the influence of the Zionist crowd, the talks with Iran are going to collapse.
China got 90.4% of its oil last year from Moscow. So it's not a real problem for China, even if it were to be effective, and it won't be. And the other part of that is the Central Party School, when Xi Jinping took over, the Central Party School was tasked with providing a strategic analysis that had a part of it what to do if something like this were to occur.